Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me once again. This is episode 14 of Daily Reflections during COVID-19. I can't tell you how pleased I am that I made it this far, 2 weeks in, every day waking up, getting dressed, getting a friend to come on my show and talk to us about what they are going through. And I have learned a lot. And thank you for sending me feedback. I've got feedback from all over the world saying that they really enjoy these sessions. We try to keep it tight, about 20-25 minutes. And this is really not politics. It's about, what are people doing? How are they coping? It's a really hard time for all of us. Many of us have never gone through something like this. And so how can we learn from each other, but also share, our own experiences in different ways. Each of us has a different journey. So today with me, I have my dear friend, Bishakha Datta. Hi, Bishakha. Good morning. How are you?
Hi, Elsa. Good to see you at 10 o'clock this morning.
I know 10 o'clock is really early sometimes on a Saturday and Sunday, but, I wanted to keep it at a fixed time. So, yeah. So thank you for making it at 10 o'clock.
And thank you for having me. Actually, I have watched a couple of past episodes, and I think this is really a great idea. And I'm delighted and honored to share whatever experiences I can.
Thank you. Vishakha, I must tell everyone that, you're in a way a mentor to me, because when I started on this journey with Safe City, I reached out to you, and whatever crazy idea I had or whatever I, ask you, invite you to do, you always say yes. Where do you get this positive energy from?
I guess, thank you for saying that. First of all, that's really sweet and really nice to hear. I guess part of the positive energy is really privilege, to be honest, which is that I, had a happy childhood. I've had largely a happy life. I've had good opportunities. And so I feel like part of, now that I'm older, that part of what I really want to do, both, intentionally and sometimes it's just default, is really, enable others in their own journeys, etc. And Elsa, you had such great ideas and have such great ideas. And it's sort of almost like a new generation really of work, right? So I actually feel very excited when I sort of see some of the stuff that you all are doing at Red Dot and Safe City, right from sort of the early, crowdsourcing stories around violence and that kind of thing, to some of the later work. So it's very genuinely meant. It's exciting to sort of see the field grow. It's exciting to see, younger women, newer actors come into the space with newer ideas. That's how it's going to keep growing. Yeah.
Thank you. And for, all those critics who say that women don't help women, I must tell you that Bishakha is really the embodiment of sisterhood. She's helped us, but not just us. She helps a lot of activists, a lot of younger organizations, because when you're starting out in this field, it can be really difficult. You need permissions to do your work, you need guidance, you need networks. And in a way, she is like the mother organization that we can, reach out to her, and under her banner of point of view, really, get us going in that way. So coming back to the matter of privilege, Vishakha, this whole social distancing that we are experiencing is actually a matter of privilege. Yeah. What is your thoughts on that? And all those images of the workers and migrants and people now who don't have food to eat. What are your thoughts about it? And can you share some of, the people that you work with, like Khabar Leria and others who are doing their best in the field?
Sure. So I think my biggest reflection at this point really is that anybody at this point in India, who has like a stable roof over their head and 2-3 meals a day, to eat is just in an enormously privileged position, right? Because a huge chunk of the country doesn't have like money, food, home, safety, forget like, let alone like physical distancing, right?
Correct.
So I think one of the things is I feel like at this moment we are going through actually 3 pandemics. One is, of course, the health issue related to the virus. I think the second is really the livelihood pandemic, right? With almost half the country not able to sort of fend for itself. This is really as critical as the public health crisis that we are facing. And I think the third one is really the mental health pandemic, which is everybody I know is facing different emotions, many of which are negative. And, it's one thing to have a roof over your head and feel a certain level of fear, dread, and anxiety. But it's another when you don't have a roof over your head and you don't know where your meals are going to come from that day. And the kind of uncertainty, fear, and anxiety about whether you'll just survive the next 3-4 days, right, is at a whole other level. So I think every sort of grassroots organization that we've ever worked with at Point of View, from like rural women's organizations in media like Khabar Lehriya or Nirantar, or we work with a bunch of organizations in Lucknow, including Sadbhavna Trust, etc., Vanangana in rural UP, sex workers groups, working class LGBTQI groups, like everybody is basically just desperately doing relief work at this point. So basically everybody is just working with the communities that they've always worked with to get food and rations into their families and into their homes, because the nature of the lockdown also keeps changing, right? Like someday you might, if you have money, someday you might be able to run out and get food for your family, but someday that it's sealed off completely. And don't forget that these are also families that are all daily wage earners, most of them. So they anyway have like very, very small amounts of money at their disposal and can't really stock up for a week or two. So that's what everyone's doing. And because we are Mumbai based and because we don't directly work with one community, we are actually this week onwards engaged in massive, like raising money, talking to our donors, using some of our own funds for relief work. So just sorting out, to just give money to all the communities that we've worked with, right? And that's sort of the, situation.
Absolutely. And I really want to point out, the challenges, because many people don't understand the challenges. Like, it's so easy to say, okay, here's the NGO, here's the money, get the relief work done. Take, for example, Red Dot. In our articles, we didn't have disaster relief or food distribution because that was not our core work. So we cannot accept money even if we want to. Then we got approached by an NGO, because we have FCRO now, like you do.
Yeah.
And but they work with a cooperative bank. And in the lockdown, the cooperative bank is non-functional. So they don't have an online bank transfer to pay vendors. And they have to go to the bank to withdraw money on a daily basis. But of course, the bank is shut. So even if they were able to accept the money, they cannot implement it. So there are all these practical challenges. So I'm really glad that you are, that mothership for so many organizations. Where can people contribute if they want to give you the money for distribution in different parts of the country?
So I think there's a number of crowdsourcing fundraisers. I'm forgetting the term. Crowdfunding. Yeah, crowdfunding initiatives that are on. Most of the ones that we are trying to help are either on ourdemocracy.in or on Keto. But there's so many at this point that I think people are also figuring out what they want to give to, right? Like, so for instance, some of the friends I've tapped will feel very strongly about animal rights. And they feel like, you know, stray dogs, cats, other animals are also sort of facing a crisis because there's no people to feed them and that kind of thing. So everybody is sort of trying to figure out who matters to them, a lot of people, and trying to give there. But there's a bunch up on keto and our democracy. Yeah.
Great. So I've put that down there for people in case they want to, contribute. I am personally working with Project Mumbai to help in food distribution. So that is cooked food and also rations to senior citizens, migrants, etc. Another part of your work, Bishakha, is on disability rights. And when we're looking at this lockdown scenario, I don't know whether people are actually thinking about all the various different groups of people who are impacted. Of course, one is the really poor migrants who have no food, no shelter, no access to money. But how do you see this lockdown period affecting persons with disabilities? Because in a normal scenario, when we did My Access, pairing an able-bodied woman with a differently able woman, we found that, it's shocking, their mobility is so impaired. So now in a lockdown mode, I don't really know what they might be going through. So maybe you can share some insights into that.
Sure. So I think with disability, it's actually, again, depends on what kind of disability you have. And again, where you are socio-economically placed, right? So for example, say a woman who's, middle class and in a wheelchair, anyway, may be confined to the home even earlier, if she's not going out to work, etc. So in one sense, what's interesting is that a lot of people with disabilities are already used to being in the home for large periods of time, right? So that part of isolation, physical distancing, the lockdown is not necessarily affecting them that deeply or changing their sort of, way of being. But I think what's really affecting people is that in the lockdown, we have to think about a lot of people with disabilities need caregivers, right? And sometimes it's very hard for the caregiver to reach that person. And then they sort of get into a very, very unsafe situation where they are stuck without any assistance and they can't fend for themselves. So that's one of the issues. I think the other issue is that there, even like materials about physical distancing, washing your hands, etc., are not necessarily always there in formats that say people who can't hear or people who can't see can experience, right? So there's been a lot of effort by disability groups to actually lobby, the government and make sure that this kind of information is going out in accessible ways so that everybody can experience it. So sort of a mixed thing, but again, some of the people who are the worst affected are really people who, anyway come from lower income communities, even in disability spaces.
I really believe that, now given that we are spending so much of time on the internet and we are consuming a lot of content, putting out a lot of content, maybe we should also look at accessible software so that everybody gets this information. I mean, it's a matter of privilege, like you said, we have access to the internet, so we can stay at home and, watch Netflix or, keep up with the news, etc. But what about those who don't? And then that brings me to the other part of your work, which is really on your digital rights. During this lockdown period, we are seeing so much of violence, online violence, Zoom bombing. Yesterday, Singapore has banned Zoom for teaching, for education, because there were two perpetrators who got into a classroom, a virtual classroom of first year secondary students, I think, and asked them to strip naked. And I don't know whether they were naked or not, but post that, the Singapore government has taken a decision not to use Zoom for education. And, I have a niece in Singapore who is accessing online classes. So it's really worrying. I mean, I like Zoom as a platform, but I've heard about these things. But apart from Zoom, you did a TEDx Warsaw talk, and I'm going to put up that link a little, once Bishakha starts talking. But really, your talk was all about access to the internet, access to a mobile phone. And today, when our life in lockdown mode, I mean, the privileged ones who can stay indoors and be doing whatever they have to be doing, if their life depends on digital access, what happens to those who are vulnerable in that space? Maybe you can share some of your insights in that.
Sure. And thank you actually for talking about accessibility just before that, because it's given me a wonderful idea, and maybe one of the things that Point of View will do going forward is actually run some webinars on how we can make all our websites, etc., accessible, as well as our social media for people with disabilities. So thank you for that, Elsa. Moving on to access, I think, it's the same thing, right? Like if you don't have a mobile phone at this point of time, or if you have, like a chunk of the country, if you come from a low-income family and you have the old style feature phone, you cannot participate in all the sort of pleasures that are being offered on the internet. Neither can you do online classes, right? So for instance, if you're a student in a municipal school, your experience may be very different from if you're a student in a private school where classes are still going on online. However, I will say that some of the very interesting sort of innovative things we're seeing is also attempts to, educate via WhatsApp, because a lot of people have WhatsApp on their phones. So people are really trying to use, not just Zoom, etc., which people like us can use, but really looking at sort of WhatsApp and other formats to, reach out to people. But again, just to give you an example, someone who lives in a neighborhood where she or they do not have internet access that easily, they may have some, but they want to recharge their mobile. Where are they going to go to recharge their mobile if it runs out of charge, right? If we have sort of electricity cuts, we've had power cuts in certain areas, right? Again, how do you sort of charge your mobile? What if you are in a state where you still don't have like 4G access and you're stuck with 2G access? What do you do? So then you don't get information, right? You don't get access to so many things related to food security, to relief, to health. I mean, it's just I think this is really a lesson in how, like, having internet access now just has to become like absolutely a fundamental right for everybody and taken seriously. And, the internet cannot just be shut off at will, right? For reasons, neither can people, like, for example, even in the Zoom case in Singapore, I would have argued for a much more nuanced approach, saying rather than now ban everybody from using Zoom, talk to Zoom, push them to, get in security measures, etc., and privacy measures, document these cases and really push the platforms to become far more secure and, encourage people to actually report these things so that something can be done with them, right? And we can use it as an opportunity, not like a clamping down on people because we're already locked down in so many ways.
I think I have to make a clarification there. I think it's only the school education classes are banned on Zoom, but I don't think Zoom is banned in Singapore.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but I agree with you. Even then, you should put the pressure on Zoom to put in security protocols rather than taking the knee-jerk reaction of, like banning it.
You should tell teachers and all in schools that, look, there's been this kind of episode. Don't panic. And if this kind of episode happens, this is how you should handle it, right? So it's an opportunity also to proactively teach teachers how to sort of, not go from like everything to nothing, but we will face numerous challenges, and it's always about how you handle that small challenge without letting it become like a global thing, right? So even in terms of just banning educational access to Zoom, it's just an overreaction in my view and not helpful. Yeah.
That probably starts another trend of, other governments without the context, adopting something like this and banning it for their citizens. No, you're absolutely right. And we must learn how to also respond in the appropriate fashion rather than banning. Banning is really easy, but really explaining to the kids what is the right thing, what is the wrong thing. Yes, this happened. How do you respond to it? That in a way is a teaching moment as well. Coming back to teaching.
Say one thing, Elsa, like think of, one of the most creative things we've seen in this moment actually is all the hand washing communication, right? Whether it's come from governments, whether it's come from private agencies, whether it's come from TikTok videos. We've seen such creative stuff around hand washing in the last 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And that itself shows us how you can sort of take something and just use it as a teachable moment, like you said.
Yes. So we are approaching the 3-week mark of a complete lockdown. For me, I have been on a social distancing mode since 8th of March, so over a month now. It's really been hard for many people, especially my younger team members. I know you also have a lot of young team members. How are they coping? How is your larger team coping?
So I think actually it's been hard for all of us, even though strangely enough, Point of View always worked semi-remotely because our full team is not based in Mumbai, I guess similar to Red Dot as well. And so we were already used to working, through many of these softwares. But I think it's different when you do it out of choice and when you do it out of sort of compulsion, right? So all of us, I think, in the first week really felt completely disoriented. And I'm talking about 16th March onwards when the Maharashtra government said work from home. Right? Yeah. So for us also almost 4 weeks. And I think what we found is that, there were so many unspoken anxieties, fears, panics, etc. So much misinformation online that we decided that rather than focus on work, we needed to do 2 things. So the 2 things we did in week 1, and we are still continuing, is, I spoke to people on the team individually. And then we just said, listen, you don't need to work 40 hours a week at this point. Take the time that you need to settle in. And I asked everybody, what kind of time do you think you can put in? And do you even want to work? Or do you want to just take this time off? I think most people felt that they wanted to do some work because it was like an anchor. Otherwise, you were floating completely, right, in these scary sort of seas. And people said we'd like to work around 4 hours a day. So then we said, okay, roughly 20-hour working week, but no pressure, no deadlines, no deliverables. Just do whatever makes you feel good. And the second thing that we started doing using Zoom actually is every alternate day at 4 o'clock, we set up just a group chat. It's just a check-in. It's like a support group, where all 13, 14 of us would just for an hour talk about the situation, like in our heads, in our hearts, the kind of anxieties we were feeling, what we would give each other, like peer advice, like, hey, if someone's not able to sleep, these are some things you can try, right? We would talk about stuff around our house. What are we seeing? Is it easy to get groceries, etc.? And we started that on the 16th of March, and we are still continuing that. Because, this every alternate day check-in where we're not talking about work, but we're just there for each other. That has become a way for people to really talk about, at whatever level people feel comfortable sharing in a group. And let me tell you, the biggest change I've seen, Elsa, is people's voices changing. In the second week, there was really this fear trapped in people's voices. And you could almost sense it, even if people weren't sharing what they were feeling, right? And real panic and dread. And I shared as well some of the, panics that I felt, because my mom is in her 80s and I'm living with her now. So I've been here for the whole time, and I haven't, I stay half the time with my partner. I haven't seen him at all since the scene. So but, I'm pretty much here. So I also, have had nights where I've consumed too much social media and then just gone down the drain, saying like, oh my God, like, what will happen, etc. So we all share this, and I think that really, really works for us to just feel we are there for each other, and we can. So that's the thing. And I think each week what we've done after the first 2 weeks, when April started, then I sort of upped it a notch, right? So I said, okay, this is also the start of a financial year. It's the start of our next strategic planning cycle. These are some of the things we need to start thinking about, including our ongoing work, how much of it goes digital, but very gently, literally like a step. And then we also said, okay, now that we are able to sort of anchor our own selves and our own emotions and minds, and, let's think about others we work with. Let's think about our partners, etc. So we didn't, honestly, we were not in a position in the last 2 weeks of March to think about anybody but ourselves and our families and our, people at work, etc. But from April, we've started reaching out and talking to our grassroots partners and doing the relief work, etc., etc. So I can see through that we are also, the fact that we are just able to widen our lens to the next level, right? And I think some very practical tips is, like, we are all trying to set up routines within the house, right? We are all trying to, really not consume social media constantly, because following the virus every 30 minutes or every 20 minutes is really not conducive to one's mental or emotional well-being at all. So it's not that we are living in the dark and we have no idea what's going on. I can tell you my practice is, I get up every morning and I log on to, the Indian Express and the Times of India online, and I read the e-paper from cover to cover, like from start to finish, just like it, the digit, literally from the front page to the back, because I started life as a journalist and I like that flow. And then I'm like, hey, I'm updated for the day. And then I, sort of don't keep checking my WhatsApp and all that kind of thing frequently. So we are doing a lot of this kind of stuff. We've just started last week our first attempt at seeing a movie together. So we saw a really fun film, which we're going to discuss this week. So as people stabilize, we're sort of pushing out a little bit, but we are not increasing the workload at this point, right? It's maximum 20 hours a week unless people want to volunteer for more. Yeah.
I am so thrilled to hear you because I've always felt that there has been some kind of connection between your organization and mine, and we have followed exactly the same approach. First, look within, strengthen within, and then look outside. And the movie nights we started every Wednesday only for our team. So we've done 2 Wednesdays, and this Wednesday the coming Wednesday will be our 3rd movie, and that's got the team really excited and stuff like that. So it's called Feminism in Real Life, but it's currently only for our team members and maybe their guests. We are not opening it to the public, and it's been really, really nice. Well,
super. Yeah.
So I'm really thrilled because then that gives me validation. I'm on the right path because,
and us as well, to be honest,
similar stuff.
Because this is new territory, Elsa, as you know, we are all using what we've learned and our instincts and our, intuition, but we are making up stuff as we go along. There's no playbook, right? So hearing it from you and hearing that it's working makes me also feel validated. Yeah.
Yes, great. Thank you. And once this is over, because it will be over, it's a matter of time. It'll be over. We have to get through this crisis. We have to support each other during this time. And when it's over, what is the first thing you are going to do?
I mean, the first thing I'm going to do when I can get out of the house and leave Worli where I live, and which is I am going to go and see my partner. Because I haven't, it's his birthday tomorrow, and I can't go and meet him, and I haven't seen him for a month. So that is really for me, leaving that aside, I live very close to the sea. And, for years, my partner used to keep saying, why don't you go for a walk in the evenings? And how you always have this thing hey, there's something I want to do, and I love walking. But it's in the throes of our past life where it's work and meetings and travel. And Elsa, both you and I travel so much.
True.
Right? Yeah. So that simple walk every evening used to be an unending aspiration in my head. And I had somehow managed to finally by January start going 2 to 3 days a week. And now the thing that I long for the most, actually, except for seeing my partner, is really to just go for a walk by the sea, which is 5 minutes from my house. More than, to be honest, I'm usually a very hectic, going out, social, extroverted type of person. But at this point, seeing movies in a cinema, going to a restaurant, all of that is very far from my mind. I think it's really just seeing the people I love and being able to just hang out, right? For me, really, just to be able to go to my house with my partner and just hang out a bit seems like an extraordinary luxury at this stage. Yeah.
I know. It's the small things that I'm really missing, my girlfriends, having a glass of wine with them, the walk in the garden. And it's... it really forces you to appreciate what you have had pre-COVID and to really reflect on how we've taken all these things for granted, right?
Totally. And, even it's so funny because at the start of this year, because it's 2020 and it's a new decade, and I was so tired of just traveling from 2010 to 2019. I think I traveled more than 4 or 5 months each year, right? And I got to the stage where I was desperate and I had a data-driven approach, and I was measuring my travel each year and trying to bring it down by 10% each year, and was succeeding. But at the start of this year, I said, you know what? I don't want to live another decade like this. And so I voluntarily in February said no to sort of 3 big trips outside the country. And was no, I need to change sort of my life. So in that sense, I was already moving in that direction. I could tell I had to slow down. This was not sustainable, right? And so from that perspective, even though this is a very, very big crisis, I think for everybody, It's really about thinking about what is it that really matters to you. What is it you want to, who do you want to be moving ahead, right? Like, what is the possibility in this that we see? Not just the pain and the despair, but what is it that we can be? What are the, like, how can we be sort of our best selves, and not just personally, like rebalance with the planet, right? There's no doubt with everything we are seeing, images of, blue skies in Mumbai, images of like that itself.
Peacocks roaming the streets.
Yeah, like, what is it that we imagine? Are we really going to go back to exactly the way we were? Or are we going to imagine sort of a new normal, which is much more like empathetic to the planet, much more like understanding that we are just one part of this?
Yes, thank you. And on that note, we'll close. I hope you will reflect and think about how can we make the post-COVID world more empathetic and more humane, and live our best selves, because we live only once, we walk this earth only once, and we need to create our own legacy. So let's leave it in a good shape, leave the earth in a good shape for the next generation. Thank you so much, Bishakha. It was fun talking to you. Have a wonderful
so much, Elsa. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you. And for those of you watching, join me tomorrow, Easter Sunday at 10 a.m. Bye.
Bye-bye.